Hello, and welcome to this edition of the Life of Purpose video study of the I Am statements of Jesus. I'm Bill Brunson.
And I'm Kip McClure.
And today we'll be looking at John 11:25 when Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And he says this not just in a moment of generic teaching. He's not seated on the side of the hill above the Sea of Galilee, disciples gathered around him. He's not at the temple just talking to the chief priests and elders. No, he is standing in a road where he is being confronted by a friend of his, and there's an issue. And the issue is his friend Lazarus has died. And Mary and Martha, Lazarus' sisters, have gone out to meet Jesus on the road because their brother is dead. And they really wish Jesus would have gotten there before he died.
And they had sent word to him.
They had sent word to him and said, come on.
Not looking good, not looking good.
And so he didn't get there in time. But Jesus looks at, it says, Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And we know that as the old radio announcer Paul Harvey would have said, the rest of the story is they go to the tomb where Lazarus' body had been for days now, and Jesus weeps at the tomb because his friend is dead. And Jesus has, he is the Son of Man. He is fully human. Even though he knows he's also the Son of God, fully divine, the Son of Man side, his friend is dead. And that death hurts.
And he's in that sort of pool of people who are coming to terms with death.
Right.
And so you can't help as a human to get pulled into their grief.
No, even though Jesus knew what was coming, Jesus knew what he was capable of. He's still caught up in the grief of those around him and the knowledge of the pain and the hurt and the loss of death, and he weeps at the tomb. But then he calls Lazarus back to life. And Lazarus emerges from the grave, and he tells them to take off the wrappings that he is wearing, and loose him and let him go. I think it's a powerful moment. But Jesus says, "I am the resurrection, and I am the life."
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at the concept of resurrection. It's found some in the Old Testament.
Mm-hmm.
You have Elijah and Elisha who bring children back to life. And then you start seeing sort of a change in the Psalms and in the prophets where, Ezekiel prophesies and the dry bones come back to life.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think Job describes it best. He said, I know that my Redeemer lives, and in the end, I'll stand on the earth, and after my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God, I myself with my own eyes, I and not another. And so the idea of kind of the resurrection of all humanity becomes a part of the Jewish tradition. And so they're familiar with this term.
Right.
And but they don't see it happen very often.
No. I mean, it was even the issue of believing in a resurrection was what was distinctly different. One of the things distinctly different between the Pharisees and the Sadducees. The Pharisees believed in the resurrection, that resurrection could happen because they know that in Daniel it says, and many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life. And I mean, so it's, they know that they believe in resurrection. The Sadducees did not believe in resurrection. Of course, the great teaching on that is they don't believe in resurrection. That's why they're sad, you see.
That's right.
That's how I was taught to remember that.
That was a good one
I
for me,
mean,
yeah.
that was that's the only way I remember
I
these
got a lot of
things.
candy in VBS because of that.
Because they're sad, you see.
That's right.
That's right. And my ability to sing the books of the New Testament also got me candy in VBS. But so that belief was always there that there could be resurrection because they had seen it. And we know that Lazarus isn't the only person that Jesus raises from the dead. He raises the son of the widow from Nain. He raises the little girl. I mean, there's other people that he raises from the dead in his ministry. Lazarus is the more pronounced because here he states, I am the resurrection and I am the life.
And the Jewish people had come down to Bethany where they were. So it was filled with a crowd of it. It was not something that happened like, in a back room.
No.
There was a whole group of religious leaders who have been tracking Jesus, wanting to figure out how to get rid of him. And he steps up and says, Yahweh, I am the resurrection and the life. That's a pretty bold statement.
Very bold statement.
Life and resurrection come through me. And he's saying it's starting, well, a lot of local news stations have this little phrase when they start their news program that drives me crazy. But they'll come on and they'll say, our local news starts now, and you kind of get startled. Jesus is looking at the people and saying, yeah, resurrection, it's not something in the future. It starts right now.
Yeah.
Resurrected life, a life full of resurrection, of newness, is something that is possible right now. And so he then turns around and resurrects Lazarus. And there's a great sermon by John Claypool, who was a pastor here in Birmingham. And it's called Laughing Lazarus. And he writes the story of if he were Lazarus and Lazarus gets raised from the dead, and you've got all these Jewish leaders who are going around judging everything, trying to put categories into what had happened, and how laughable it would be for Lazarus, for all their threats, their questions, their demand that you follow tradition, how all of that would have just been sort of funny to Lazarus because, well, he's experienced death and he's alive again. And so all this stuff doesn't scare him. It scare me with a threat. I don't care. What are you going to do?
Right.
Kill me? I mean, been back from life once. We can do it again.
Yeah.
And even the religious leaders are going, what do we do with Lazarus?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have a category. We got to kill him again.
At one point, they do plot to kill Lazarus. I mean, that's a very harsh thing to do, but he's sort of an example of Jesus saying, I am the resurrection and the life, and here's the living, breathing Lazarus walking around. And that new life has come into Lazarus through Jesus. But I think that while we can look at this from that physical resurrection moment of the idea that Jesus brings Lazarus physically back from the dead, and we can understand even in our time of loss, whenever we lose someone, and we have deep faith, and we know that they're a person of deep faith, and we know, as we always say, we know where they're going. It doesn't stop us from being like Jesus in that moment and weeping, because we also know the pain and the hurt and the loss of death. And so we know that side of it, even though we know where they're going. I think resurrection it's not just a one-time, in life kind of event. I think the power that Jesus tells us when he says, I am the resurrection and I am the life, I think that's an everyday opportunity for us.
It's a spiritual thing.
Right.
Where the old dies and God brings newness to life. And I think the difficulty with resurrection is something has to die in order for resurrection to happen.
Right.
And that might be that my grudge, my unforgiveness, my sense of owning and deserving all of the stuff that I
Yeah,
have
sense
in
of
life,
entitlement has to
entitlement that I
die.
am,
Yeah.
it has to die in order for a resurrected life that's freed from those chains of this world.
Hmm.
Uh, those no longer have power, but in order for that to happen, well, we have to let God. Well, I mean, we have to somehow let God take it from us.
That's right. I mean, because when you think about Lazarus in that powerful moment after Jesus resurrects him, and he opens the grave, and they open the grave, and Lazarus comes out, he's still bound up in all the linens and everything they would have put on him, and Jesus gives the order to loose him and let him be free. And there's such power in that for us that sometimes we can get buried in so many things in our lives. We can get buried by our grudges and our unforgiveness. We can get buried by our obsession to climb higher or to get more. We can get buried by all of that and bound by it so that we have no freedom. We have no freedom or ability to do anything new or anything different because we're so wound up in whatever it might be. And suddenly, if we listen, we can hear through the tomb we put ourselves in, the voice of Jesus calling us to come out and offering us new life and offering us the opportunity to have those things that bind us removed so that we can live the life that he's called us to live.
You know, I've had several different times parishioners who have lost a good job, and they are lost because, I mean, that's been what defined them for so long.
Yeah.
And then it's been fascinating for me to see a 6 month, 9 month later when they come back and they say, you know, I never realized how that job really wasn't good for me and how much I was not experiencing in life with this job. And now God has opened new doors for me, new places, new opportunities. And I would have never gotten there had that death of that job not happened. And so I wonder how many times in life that we lose things, and part of us is mourning, well, I've lost this. But I think the greater spiritual lesson for us, if Jesus is the resurrection and life, is, well, what new thing does God have for us that we may not see coming, but will change our lives completely?
Because if we open our ears and listen, Jesus, the resurrection and the life, may be calling us out to something brand new.
Absolutely.